Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Baccei, Communications Manager here at the Leadership Institute, and welcome to the LI Studios. Today, we'll be talking about writing for your job search. This is the first of two career skill webinars that we'll be looking at doing for you all. Joining us in the studios today to talk about this is Lauren Bolton. She works in alumni relations over at the Charles Koch Institute, and before that was also a recruiter over there. So she has a lot of knowledge here in this area about doing cover letters and resumes and thank you notes and all of this. So we'll get to all of this today and have a great discussion about this. Before we get into that, though, I would like to remind you all, as usual, you can ask your questions and have them answered live by emailing us at live@leadershipinstitute.org. And also follow along with the conversation and even join in the conversation today on Twitter by using hashtag LIWebinar. With that, Lauren, thank you for joining us, and we're all excited to hear about today's topic.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk to everybody today about writing for your job search. And as you mentioned, I used to be a recruiter at the Charles Koch Institute. I've been there for about a year now and just recently switched to the alumni relations team. But as you can probably imagine, as a recruiter, I saw many, many resumes and have done resume building workshops and definitely done quite a few interviews too. So I have experience in that field. Also, at one point in my career, I definitely was job searching. So I can hopefully teach everyone, and you can learn from my mistakes as well throughout this presentation. So I'm going to talk to you guys again what we're going to cover today. So we're going to be talking about resumes, cover letters, writing samples, and emails. And then also writing down what you know, which is definitely one of my favorite things that we're going to discuss. But first off, and one of the most important things that you will need to know is a resume. So what is the goal of a resume? It really is to showcase your skills and your past accomplishments to land an interview. So writing for your job interview, writing for this is going to be everything we're talking about today, you're going to need to know to write for your job search. So on average, and this is kind of scary, a recruiter will look at your resume for only 5 to 7 seconds, which really does mean that you have 5 to 7 seconds to convince somebody to spend more time on you. So it really does just need to be short and to the point, just like with everything we're going to be talking about today.
5 to 7 seconds, that does not seem like a lot of time.
Yeah, no, it definitely is not.
And that's due to the volume of resumes you get in a time period?
Good question.
Yeah.
It also is because people are looking for just very, very specific things. So a recruiter, when they're looking at your resume, is going to go in there and just look. They know what they're looking for and they know what they want, and they want that information to be very easy to access. So it really does, you need to make it as easy for them as possible. And if they look over that and it's not to their liking, then they are going to skip over your resume.
So layout is very, very important when it comes to which I'm assuming you're going to get into here.
Absolutely. So got a lot to talk about on resumes. So I have two resumes here that I want to show you guys, and both of these resumes have the same content on them. The difference is the format. And as you were saying, format is extremely important because it does make it very easy for the recruiter to see what you're going to do. So we have the resume on the left and the resume on the right. And hopefully by the end of this, you guys will all have a resume that looks like the one on the right. That's really what we're going for here. So here is the resume on the left that we want to avoid things like crazy fonts, color changes. Really quickly, I do want to draw attention to the objective statement that's up here at the top. We usually think that objective statements are unnecessary, but I will go into more detail about that. Just want everybody to have an understanding of what it is. And here's the redone resume. Hopefully everyone's resume will look like this. So again, formatting is very important. I really do want to draw attention to the bullet points because I used to have paragraphs in my resume. Paragraphs are absolutely something that you want to avoid. Again, just trying to make it as easy as possible.
That just seems like common sense we've already established that somebody's only looking at your resume for about 5 to 7 seconds. Nobody's going to spend time going through paragraphs. They want BuzzFeed brevity where they can just look at the bullet points and go down the list that way.
Exactly, and I'm glad that you said that because that's actually an example that I use. Try to think BuzzFeed lists as opposed to article in the Atlantic or something of that nature. So how long should your resume be? Again, I was super excited about all the stuff I did, so my resume definitely was 2 pages. We really do want to avoid that, so the average standard rule is 1 page for every 8 to 10 years of experience, and you really do need to follow that norm.
I mean, that seems like, how does somebody condense all of the work that they do? I've been here for 2 years and I've done a lot of work. How would I condense that down to 3 bullet points? Are there certain things I should look at more than others or something like that?
Yeah, so ultimately I say look at anything that you have gained skills from and include that on your resume.
Gotcha.
So you really do, because anything you put on your resume you will be asked about, and you really want to be proud of the things that you put on your resume so it's easier for you to talk about.
Okay.
So think of the things that you've actually gained skills from and feel free to put that on your resume. Things to include, and I can also talk about things not to include. You should definitely include your education. So where you went to school, what you majored in, if necessary, depending on your GPA, do include your GPA. One thing out there for those of you who haven't yet graduated, do include your anticipated graduation date. The reason we do that is so employers know when they can start hiring you, which is very important. Also, if you have any honorary distinctions or scholarships, study abroad experience, something that really sets you apart, it's okay to include that too. It shows a little bit more about yourself in the education realm. So work experience, of course, you might be saying, obviously, we would include work experience, but you can include things, so full-time, part-time jobs, internships. One thing that I always tell people, like I was saying, include things that you have gained skills from. So we have seen people in the past have gaps in their resume, and we asked this one candidate in particular why there were gaps, and he said that he had been bartending but didn't include that on his resume because he thought it wasn't relevant. And we say that's absolutely relevant experience. You've gained customer focus experience, just customer engagement, anything of that sort, and also it's a high pressure job.
Right. It would be would you tell that person, obviously don't tell me in the bullet points that you serve drinks to people, things like that. Would you tell them to, put bartending on there, but mention, those specific qualities that you gained in that, and then rather than, oh, I serve drinks to, 800 people a night or something like that? Yeah,
you definitely want to make your resume more numbers and goals oriented. So use those action words. Right. So,
but also make the bullet points relevant to the job you're applying for.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely do that too. I know sometimes I've had some experience in the past where it's a little bit difficult to do that, and that's okay. But for as much as you possibly can, definitely do try to do that. But great question. Thank you. So extracurricular activities, also please include those on your resume. They are very relevant. So if you have any campus involvement whatsoever, whether that's Greek life or volunteer experience, you can feel free to include that.
Now, before we go on, would you include those in 2 different sections, your work experience and your extracurricular activities?
So I used to on my resume, however, it's a complete preference thing. It depends really how much people have on their resumes. Okay. So if they have a lot, then you can feel free to break that into 2. If it's not a lot, then you can group those together. Okay. So that's one of those things that's more of a preference. Okay. And as long as it's easy to read, you can do whatever you'd like. What else? Technical skills. So this is one thing I always tell people. I don't have a skill section on my resume at all. I think this is because I like to think I still have skills. I just don't have a section on my resume for these skills because the trend nowadays has been only including technical skills. So if you have something like Photoshop, or if you're an Excel wizard or something of that sort, then that's completely relevant and that is something you should include. Or if you speak a second language. Otherwise, saying things like you're detail-oriented or that you're proficient in Word, that's something I hope in 2015 you are proficient in Word and can get around computers.
So in the skills section, you're really looking for those points that set you above other candidates.
Yes, definitely. So anything that's a little bit more technical, if you have taken a class, something that does set you a little bit above and beyond. And references. So we always say, and this is one of those things, some people say yes, other people say no. We say do not include your references on your resume. Typically, most applications now are online, and they do have a separate section for these references. Also, thinking back to your goal of a resume, you want to get to the point as quickly as possible, and references can take away from that. Also, saying references available upon request. The hope is that if your potential employer does ask you for these references, you still will provide them.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, you might have
and it gives
a
them
larger
a reason
issue.
to email you later.
Yeah, exactly. Also, a photo. So we see this surprisingly often. We tell everybody, do not include a photo on your resume. Thinking back to the goal, your photo doesn't really do anything for you in the way of showcasing your skills. Unless you're an actor or a model or anything of that sort, then please do include your photo because that's relevant. Otherwise, try to stay away from that. And formatting and font. So I do not like formatting things. It drives me crazy, but unfortunately, in my opinion, it's one of those things that you really do have to do.
Right.
So focus on font size between 10.5 to 12.5. Anything bigger or smaller is a little unprofessional, hard to read, and then it starts looking a little bit like a Disney cartoon or something. Also, definitely use normal fonts. So normal and professional for this entire presentation I'm talking to you guys about is what I really do want to focus on. So Times New Roman,
no Comic Sans.
Yeah, exactly. Please no Comic Sans, don't use that. So also, as far as formatting goes, you definitely want to use italics, bolding, underlining, just anything to guide the eye and make it clear when one section starts and another section begins. And feel free to play around with your margins. So I think my margins are 1/2 inch, maybe even smaller than that. Just make sure that when you print it off, it is still on the piece of paper.
Right. Now, formatting and these sorts of things, Word and all these other have like templates that you can use. Do you ever recommend using those to put your your resume together? I know from talking to some people, there's a little bit of controversy here because the templates don't allow you to use all the space you possibly could use. Do you have any specific opinions of how you feel about that?
So I personally just use a regular Word document, and that's completely fine with me. As far as templates go, if you find one that is great for your resume and the amount of experience that you have on it, then it's completely okay to use a template.
Sure.
Otherwise, I would say just do what is best for you and what works well.
Okay.
So bullet points. Again, I definitely used to have paragraphs on my resume because I was super proud of all of the stuff I'd done in the past, and it turns out that is the worst thing really that you can do, in my opinion, on a resume. So you want to have, on average, 2 to 5 bullet points and no more than 5 per every role that you have listed. So, and like I was saying earlier, and like you mentioned, make sure that these are action words. So you really do want it to be very to the point, something that shows numbers if you have numbers that were grown.
Should you, when you decide 2 to 5 bullet points, should it be consistent all the way through, or is it okay to say on my first one I have 4, on my second one I have 3, and then the rest I have 2, or something of that nature?
Yeah, it's definitely okay to. You don't have to have the same number throughout the entire resume.
Gotcha.
If you do probably not want to go more than, if you have 1 bullet point, you might want to even question why that's on your resume in the first place, and if that's something you should include. And then more than 5 gets really into, it starts looking like a paragraph, and it's a lot to read.
And it's a lot of space too. It takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, exactly. That's room that you could have for something else. And then active voice. So what do I mean by the active voice? I've talked about this a little bit. So things to avoid and things to use. You really do want to avoid listing things. And this is a trap that I fell into. So I did X, Y, Z. This was my role. Sounds very cookie cutter. But if you use results-oriented language and action-oriented language, it is definitely better. So say you grew membership, say you negotiated, you maintained something. If you grew membership from 6 people to 10 people, that's completely relevant and something you should include on your resume. And it does get away from those lists as well. And objective statements. So as I mentioned, I pointed out objective statements at the very beginning. Things we want to avoid in general at the Charles Koch Institute anyway, and a lot of other people I've talked to have said no on objective statements. So what we don't want to see is current undergraduate seeking internship at this organization. The fact that you have applied in the first place indicates that. However, one exception, this is something where an objective statement can come in really handy. So if you're an engineer or a biochem major and you're applying for a policy organization, it could benefit you to say why you want to work for this organization. So if you're majoring in biochemistry and you want to use your knowledge and skills to work in a political oriented role, then just explain why that would be.
What would be the benefit of including that in your resume over just putting it into your cover letter?
So that's if you don't have, you should include that in your cover letter if you do have a cover letter, and I will talk about that as well. How a lot of places now don't allow you to submit a cover letter.
Oh, really?
So in this example, use an objective statement if you don't have a cover letter.
Okay.
Otherwise, this is something that absolutely is perfect for a cover letter. Yeah, great clarifying point, thank you. And finally, always send as a PDF, always. And the reason you do that is so the formatting doesn't get messed up. So the formatting that you've worked really, really hard on, if you send it as a PDF, it will look exactly the way you see it as the other person sees it. Also, again, just name it something really professional and normal. That's a common theme throughout my presentation. So just first name, last name, resume, fine, perfect. And finally, this should go without saying. Unfortunately, it does not. Always proofread, always proofread. Having other people look over your resume is one of the best things that you can do and get as many eyes on it as possible.
Naturally.
So now that we have talked about all about resumes, we're going to move on to cover letters. So I say before you even start your cover letter, do some research about the organization. So you really do want to check it out and go above and beyond just reading the job description. That way you know a lot more about this company, any challenges they might be facing. Feel free to go on LinkedIn.
And that will all help you later down the road when you get into that interview situation and they're like, oh, what do you like about this organization? Or what kind of projects do we work on that you would like, or something of that nature? Yeah,
doing this step right up front will, one, help you out with your cover letter, but two, it will help you out down the road, especially if you are, if you do land an interview. So find out any challenges the company might be facing. That's always a great thing to start. And think about the culture of the organization that you're applying to. So the tone of your cover letter might be different if you're applying to a creative type of startup as opposed to a very a bank or something that is a little bit more serious. So you have a little bit of room to play around with there, but make sure you understand the tone of the company and really the culture of that company as well. And then once you get into your cover letter, open strong. So don't list why you have the job. Again, trying to avoid lists here. State why you really want this job and why you would be good for it. So that's something that is just a little bit more powerful than just saying, oh, I want this job. I saw this job listed on this website. That's pretty much kind of a waste of space, to be honest. Also mention if you have a connection there. So in this opening or second paragraph, definitely mention if you know somebody at the organization, or if it's relevant to talk about where you saw this job, if you do have a connection at the organization.
Do you have an example of something like that? Of like mentioning if you have a connection, like, I know this person at this, so what sort of relevant details should you include in something like that?
So it really depends how you know the person and how well you know the person. So maybe if you just met somebody, maybe if you know of somebody and they don't know you, for example, don't mention that. But if you met a recruiter at a recruiting event, you can say, I met this person, or you can mention how you met a person. So for example, reason employers like to see this is because referrals and word of mouth is still the best way to hire for positions, to be honest. The people who are hired by referrals, they last longer in their roles, they're more fulfilled, and employers like hiring from referrals more than any other way. So this is sort of that connection where you get that. And then to also talk about what you can bring to the table. So if you understand what challenges the company is going through, then you can definitely talk about what you can bring to the table to either help solve that problem or something of that nature. Also, and this is something that I used to think was really cheesy when I was looking up cover letters, but honestly it makes a really big difference. So show enthusiasm. There are so many people out there applying for so many jobs, and in today's economy, in today's day and age, you really do want to hire somebody who's very, very enthusiastic about working for your company. I know that's something at the Charles Koch Institute. We want to know why somebody is applying for a job there, and we want to know why they would be excited to work there. So everybody, in most organizations, they typically tend to, or hopefully like what they are doing, and I know that I certainly do. So I want somebody else who's going to share in that enthusiasm with me. Also, showing your enthusiasm is going to let your personality bleed through a little bit, and that's perfect. That's something that you absolutely do want in a cover letter. And then do show personality, but try not to make it cheesy or corny. So still be authentic in how you're talking about this company, but do it in a professional manner, absolutely. Also, I should say, do not send in a generic cover letter. So applying to 10 jobs that you are very, very excited about is going to be better than applying to 100 jobs that you might be lukewarm on. An employer really is going to be able to tell the difference between that, and they do, again, want to hire somebody who is enthusiastic about their company and what they're doing. And if you are more excited about something, then that shows a little bit more, and that's the reason that you would do that. So cover letters continued, keeping it short. So short and to the point. You do want your cover letter to be 1 page, no more than a page, and then you can even go a little bit on the shorter side if you'd like. So maybe 2 or 3 to 4 paragraphs at the most. Otherwise, it starts getting a little bit long, a little bit lengthy. And again, just short and to the point for pretty much everything that we're going to talk about is very important. Some questions to help you guide your writing. So think about who your audience is. So who are you writing to in this organization? Again, think of the tone and the culture of the company. If it's a bank, as I mentioned, versus a startup or a creative company, it is going to be a little bit different. Again, keeping it to the point, what is the goal and what is the purpose that you are writing this letter? So thinking about that question will help you formulate what you will write about, and it will help you keep it short and to the point. And then again, what can you offer your audience? If you do know of something that the company is going through, or if you've helped solve the problem in the past, then this can be a really great tool, and that can show what you can bring to the table a little bit more. And then also, one thing that's very important about a cover letter is that it is different than a resume, and you want to use your cover letter to complement your resume. So you don't want it to restate your resume. It really should be a complementing tool that helps clarify any questions.
So you don't want to restate what's on your resume, but you want to explain what's on your resume? Is that what you're...
Yeah, so highlight key points or highlight things that you might be excited about. Use it to delve a little bit deeper into some of the opportunities. But again, you are keeping your cover letter short and to the point, so you can't, of course, go over every little thing that you have done in your resume. So definitely use it as a complementing tool and something that will showcase your skills more. Ultimately, an employer is going to want to know what skills you focus on and what you're good at. So use the cover letter to really highlight the skills that your resume talks more about. And then, of course, after that, then you go into your interview and then talk a lot more about that. And when you can't submit a cover letter. So a trend nowadays, since online applications have become a thing, a lot of companies don't ask for cover letters anymore. So a cover letter is a way to communicate your skills and a chance to talk more about yourself. However, you don't always have that opportunity. I know at the Charles Koch Institute, we actually don't ask for cover letters. So we have an online questionnaire, and we'll ask people about their experiences and their opportunities then. But you still, in that instance, if that ever happens, if you can't submit a cover letter, definitely convey your enthusiasm for the role, not in your resume, but in the questionnaire that's asked online. And then also, this is one thing that we still run into a lot. People just really want to submit a cover letter so badly, and we just don't require any. So if we get a cover letter and a resume together, it's almost kind of a hassle because we don't want the cover letter. So always just give your employer what they want. Just give them what they're asking for. If they don't ask for a cover letter, then you don't need to submit a cover letter. If they don't ask for a writing sample, don't submit a writing sample. Just very clearly give them what they want. And of course, if they do want a cover letter, then absolutely provide a cover letter. So everything goes both ways. But writing samples. So when do you use a writing sample? So a writing sample, again, really only use it when your employer wants it. So sometimes some positions for the Charles Koch Institute, we don't ask for writing samples, but other positions we do. So again, just really understand what exactly your employer wants in that example. And writing a sample is a way to really just show off your skills. So find out what topic your employer wants this writing sample on. For example, if you're applying for a PR position, then you probably want to submit a press release. Or if you're applying for a journalism organization, then you probably want to submit a newspaper clipping. Same thing down the line. Research position, research paper. So
Well,
really
that old college paper that you love. And
yes, depending on the old college paper there. So yeah, just really submit what your employer wants. If you're unsure of what they want, then you can always ask. That is completely okay. However, if you do not know who to ask, then we always say submit a stronger unrelated sample over a weaker related sample. And then if need be, they will ask for a different sample later, and you can either come up with something new, but ideally you would already have these writing samples lying around, especially if you have been working in that field. So also, just like your resume, just like your cover letter, tailor the writing sample to the job. So you really do want this to be sort of a package for each job, and that's why we say apply for 10 jobs that you are excited about as opposed to 100 just random generic jobs. So just allow your enthusiasm to shine through and give the employer what they want there. Also, one thing to note, different fields have different styles that they like seeing. So Chicago style, MLA style, APA, really understand what field, what type of citations they use and what they like to see, and then use that if you are submitting your writing sample to them.
Is that something you can just ask them if you are not sure?
Yeah,
do you guys what sort of style do you guys cite things with, or something like that?
Yeah, so you can definitely ask. That's completely okay. Or I would say first, before you ask, go online and see what other people are doing. So use the ask as a backup. It is better to be safe than sorry, but if you can answer that question without having to ask somebody, that's definitely preferable. And then generally keep your writing sample 2 to 5 pages. Again, shorter if possible. I know some fields like law, or if it's a research paper, they might require it to be a little bit longer, but they might state that. You don't really want to overwhelm somebody with a 20-page writing sample because chances are they're not going to read the whole thing anyway.
Right.
So you can, and if that's the case, if you do have a really long paper, you can just take a sample from that paper and then submit that. That's completely okay. And then, of course, be clear and concise. This relates back to giving the employer what they really want. And as always, do what they ask. If they do want a longer writing sample, that's great. If they want a shorter writing sample, then provide that. Things not to do. Again, I mentioned this before. So do not send a writing sample unless you are asked. We have people do this all the time, and then it's, again, just sort of in the trash for us. Also, don't send something that's heavily edited by something else. The reason is because it's not a good representation of your work, and if you're asked to provide another writing sample, then they could be drastically different, and then questions are going to be raised about what exactly is going on in that instance. Something else, going back to the college paper that you referenced, avoid submitting writing samples that you've done with a group, if at all possible. You do want this to be the best presentation of your work, and generally if you've done something in a group, that's not going to be the case. Also, if you are asked questions about your writing samples in your interview and you talk about how you did a group project, that's also going to raise some questions about the quality of the writing sample, whether you were the person who wrote this paper or not, and you really just want to avoid that.
Sure.
Again, don't send a large paper. Make sure you know what the employer wants. And as always, proofread. So don't send in something that has a lot of glaring errors. One thing I tell everybody is it is okay to have a few very minimal errors. So if I'm looking over a resume or a cover letter, and if I see one word that's misspelled, I'm not going to hold that against you. However, if you have several mistakes, that is something that is going to be a red flag.
Right. As close to perfect as possible.
Yes, exactly.
Before we get into the next part of your topic, I want to just go back to cover letters a minute because we do have a question from one of our viewers that would like to know about cover letters. So Jack, one of our viewers today, would like to know, is there a specific format or way that someone who is looking to work on the Hill may want a cover letter compared to a cover letter directed to someone in the private sector? So is there a difference in format in different sectors, basically?
You know, that's actually a very good question. As far as I know, from my understanding, the formatting is the same throughout. So you're going to use the same format. The difference there is going to be what you talk about.
Right.
So talking about something in the private sector is going to be a little bit different than talking about something that you apply for on the Hill. And really just think about what your goals are. And that's definitely something that you want to talk about in your cover letter and how that might relate to your experience and your goal long term. So not sure if I answered that question, but please feel free
it's
to.
It's less of a layout format problem than a content issue that you're looking at with that.
Exactly. And that's one of those things that for pretty much any cover letter, the format is going to be the same. You're going to be looking at 3 to 4 paragraphs and again, keep it short and to the point.
And I think, like you mentioned before, it makes sense to do the research into what you're looking at. Go on to if you're applying to a job in the Hill, go on to that congressman or congresswoman's website, see what kind of blog posts they write, and see what kind of formats they put it in, and that will give you a much better understanding of what they're looking for. I imagine.
Yeah. And again, that's one of those things too, as long as it's easy to read, it's going to be okay. So you want the format itself to be very easy to read, and then they're going to be looking for content. You just need to make sure that it's presented in a professional, clean manner that's easy for them to go through and pick out exactly what they're looking for. So I would also say have somebody else look over your cover letter, and of course, you should do that for everything, but for proofreading and also just how it looks. So it should be aesthetically pleasing, absolutely.
Great.
Great, thank you. All right, so using email. I think email is such a great tool for when writing for your job search and I could be biased because this has helped me so much in the past and with everything that I've done in all of my job searches and all of my jobs. So why is email great? It shows that you can be prompt. It shows that you have initiative. You can use it to show that you are thoughtful and thinking about another person and that you're excited about an opportunity. And probably most importantly, it makes you readily available. So you should be very, very prompt and quick to respond when using this email tool. So when to use it? So you can use it after meeting somebody. So for example, if you go to an event and you meet somebody, talk to them, and find out that a role is happening, so you should follow up with them. Again, be very prompt with it and professional, and then just say, hey, by the way, great talking to you, would love to hear more about this role. And then again, just make sure you're very readily available. Another time that you can use email is trying to get your resume out by word of mouth. So this is actually how I got my most recent job. So I started, after I let my employer know I was looking, I started my job search. And I had emailed a few people. And typically, if you know of anybody who's a great connector, so this might be somebody working in outreach, somebody working in development, somebody that really likes getting out and talking to people, this is a really great tool and something that you should pull on. So it's okay to email somebody, and even if you don't know them that well, and say, hey, by the way, I'm looking for a job, can I send you my resume? Feel free to include that resume in PDF form. And then typically, I don't send along writing samples or anything else by that point, as I'm just sending along my resume. If somebody else wants more information, then they will follow up with you and ask. But definitely use email after an interview or an info call. So for the Charles Koch Institute, I do a lot of interviews and a lot of info calls. And one thing, I'm always very impressed with people when I see that after an interview, they've followed up with me very quickly and thanked me for the time. So I think that's something that is very thoughtful of a person, and it's something that I always appreciate. It does help set people, it's a little bit more, it sets you up in a better position because that hiring manager or whoever you've emailed is thinking more highly of you. So it's just kind of a nice thing to do, and that could give you that extra boost. And then finally, really use it to say thank you. So whether you're thanking somebody for your time, or for their time, or after an interview, or after a coffee to talk about an opportunity, definitely email them and say thank you. Also, if you have an interview, so for example, if you go out and you meet somebody for coffee and they say, by the way, you should follow up with this person, this could be a really great tool for you, just keep that person updated and say, by the way, out of this conversation, I reached out to so-and-so and I got a job interview. Thank you so much for your time. And just keeping them in the loop about what's happening there is a really great way to stay relevant.
A couple quick questions from our audience about emails, so we're on topic here. So the first question this person has is, how long should you wait to first contact that person? Should it be the same day, the same night, the next day right away, as soon as you get to your office, as soon as you turn on your computer in the morning? What do you generally suggest?
So I say as soon as possible. So not creepily soon, right? So
not a 1 o'clock in the morning email.
Yeah, or don't leave an interview and then that be the first thing you do. Maybe if you give it an hour, that's completely okay. So I know that in my opinion and a lot of my colleagues' opinions, people have followed up with us very soon, like 30 minutes to an hour, and we're like, and to us that says, oh my gosh, this person's so excited about this opportunity, they've already reached out to us. Right. So I would say that it almost can't be, just wait 30 minutes and then email, and then don't wait a long time. So you don't want to send something that's 3 days late. So if it has been 3 days, and just do it before then, really, because at that point in time, it raises questions. It would raise questions in my mind, like, why didn't this person contact me earlier? Why did they wait 3 days now? Did they forget about it? Did they have something else going on? It just raises questions that you don't want to be raised.
Then is it okay to follow up? So like if you don't respond to me right away, is it okay to say, hey, I just want to make sure you got this? Is that okay? Is that okay? And then when is it? Is there an amount of times where it's not okay? Like when does it become bothersome? Okay, this person keeps following up with me. It's been 4 times. Like I got it. Thanks.
Yeah. So there definitely can be too much follow-up. Again, really listen and understand what the other person, what the job process is. So you can follow up with somebody if you've had an interview and haven't heard back. Definitely follow up with them.
Gotcha.
So if they say we're going to talk to you on Monday and Monday comes and goes and you still haven't heard from them, definitely follow up, because that also shows that you know what their schedule is like, you know what was said, and and you want to know. So again, you're taking the initiative there. It definitely can be too much if you keep saying, hey, I asked you this question, or hi, just wanted to know what's going on. So there is a balance, and I would say probably if you've emailed somebody 3 times and they don't get back to you, don't email it again. It's probably not going to happen at that point. But yeah. And then, so again, use email to be prompt, be professional, just like everything you do. Professional and normal, it's really the goal here. And you can, and when I say be professional, if you've sat down and if you've talked with somebody and there was some point in the conversation where you want to bring something up, please do let your personality shine through, but do keep it professional, whatever it was. And then, so use this as a tool to stay relevant in somebody's mind. We sort of touched on this a little bit, so if it's been a little while and you want to follow up, but you can also, so if you've talked to somebody 6 months ago and then you're still looking for a job, it's okay 3 months later, 6 months later, to email that person and say, hi, by the way, just wanted to let you know, this is what I've been doing the past few months. I'm still looking, so I'm interested in either opportunities at your organization or by telling them to keep an eye out for you. So use it as a tool to stay relevant in somebody's mind. Also, definitely use this tool, use email if you know of somebody at an organization that you've applied to. So for example, if you've applied to a job at the Charles Koch Institute and you know me, then email me and say, hey Lauren, by the way, I have applied for a job at the Charles Koch Institute, just wanted to let you know. So that is one of those things that I will actually forward to a hiring manager and say, hi, by the way, this person understands that they're relying on their connections, they're thinking of me, they're being very thoughtful, and they're showing lots of initiative. Likely if you take the step to do that, you have some sort of enthusiasm about that role as well. I know, and this also eliminates chances of risk happening in the sense that if you apply for a job and somebody and the hiring manager says, hey, by the way, Paul, do you know so-and-so who applied for this job? I see that you guys used to work together. And then Paul says, oh yeah, I know that person. Why didn't they ask me? Why didn't they tell me they were applying for this role? Like, I could have put in a good word for them or something of that sort. That might, to me, when people don't communicate, it raises questions, especially if they're old coworkers or friends or something of that sort. Why wasn't this communication happening? And it just, again, a little bit of a red flag, not a major one, but
something you want to be aware of. And
something that can benefit you as opposed to hurting you.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Before we get into any more of the details, we do have some questions coming in on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I want to get to those. This person asks, Lauren, hi, they say, hi, Kyle and Lauren. Do you recommend scanner codes in your resume? I have a QRTY scan code on mine.
Okay, so I would say it depends on your industry. If you're applying for a job at a political organization, I would say absolutely not. If you're applying for a job for someplace like Google or someplace that's a little bit more on the techie side, then that's something that could be a tool, especially, and again, if you're a graphic designer or something like that and into a web designing field, you have a little bit more room to play around with your resume. So keep in mind that it's going to be a representation of your work. So for you, I would say it definitely depends on the industry that you're working in. As far as just any run-of-the-mill job, though, my answer is no.
So again, do your research, be familiar with the type of industry you're applying to be a part of.
Yeah.
One other question from Twitter, and then we'll get back into it. This person says, I have a pie chart on my experience on my resume. Are graphs okay?
Again, I would say no. This is one of those things, if you are a graphic designer, that could be kind of cool if you're using some type of graphic design. Otherwise, I would say sort of take that off. It does depend on the industry once again. However, I would lean toward no on that.
For the lowest common denominator, avoid that and explain that later if it's requested of you.
Exactly. And then I'm actually going to, so that is something that you can include on your LinkedIn. So I actually thought LinkedIn was completely useless and silly before I came to the Charles Koch Institute. And I think that's just because I didn't really understand what was going on with LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is more detailed than a resume. So employers will go on, they will look at your LinkedIn page, and so keep it professional, make sure everything is on there, but it is a chance to, if somebody looks over your resume, spends more than that 5 to 7 seconds, and then says, oh, well, I wonder if this person's on LinkedIn, then they can go and they can check out further details than you could provide in a resume, a cover letter, or a writing sample. So that's one of those things for the person who has the pie chart. That's something that you can put on your LinkedIn, and that I think would be very cool to find on somebody's LinkedIn page. So that is an opportunity to do that. But also LinkedIn gives you the opportunity to showcase your volunteer experience or really what other skills that you could have, whether it's public speaking or anything of that nature. And people can endorse you on LinkedIn, which is sort of, I think it's sort of gimmicky, but you can still put that on there. And again, LinkedIn is your professional social media footprint. So
it's also like it's one of the first places that when somebody Googles your name, that will come up. So it's something that you want up there to sort of, when somebody Googles your name, that's one of the things that they'll see.
Yeah, Definitely. And I know I use this tool a lot. So at CKI, we don't check out people's social media profiles, but a lot of other companies and organizations do. We do look at LinkedIn quite a lot. And another thing that I didn't know about LinkedIn, so people can search for keywords on LinkedIn. So if we are looking for a graphic designer who lives in Arlington, Virginia and graduated from the University of Arizona, you can source for that on LinkedIn. So you can source for very, very specific things. So in that sense, it is a great tool. Typically, organizations that have recruiters with that much time are larger organizations. So it really does depend on what type of work you're getting into, but you should have a somewhat polished and updated LinkedIn regardless. That's one of those things that can only help you. And then, so social media. So make sure you're proud and comfortable with your social media. So assume that anything you put online is not private, and just think of all communications that you're keeping at least somewhat professional. So it's okay to play around a little bit there, depending on the organization that you're working for. Again, use LinkedIn. Depending on the industry, you can use Twitter, so it's okay to follow executives or tweet at somebody or retweet their stuff, that's okay. And then also on Facebook. So again, always keep it professional, but I have posted on Facebook before when I've been looking for a job, and I've had people message me on Facebook when they're looking for a job, and everyone's on Facebook, so go where the people are, just make sure you're keeping it professional. So I've actually helped and found a few people on Facebook because they've messaged me and say, hey, by the way, I'm looking for this job. Or I've connected them with another opportunity, and it was just a very easy way for them to access me, which is something that I appreciated. And then I have one bullet point under the don't section. It's just don't be unprofessional. And this just really encompasses everything with social media. So if you do message somebody on Facebook, if you do tweet something, make sure it's professional. So this is one of those things that it's a little touch, and it can help you, but it can also hurt you if you don't do it in the right way. And finally, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Write this down. So prepping for interviews and making your point. So why should you write things down? If you write something down, it's easier to remember, it's going to help you out, and it's going to make you think critically about what you were talking about or what you should be talking about. So it will help your answers be more in depth, and also one of the most important things, I think, only you know what you want. So use this to help figure out what your skills are. One thing that I've had quite a few people suggest to me is actually write down the highs and lows in your workday over, of course, a few weeks, and you'll start noticing patterns of what you like and what you don't like, and that is absolutely relevant information, because in the end, only you are going to be promoting you, and if you can't tell somebody what you're good at, it's not going to be able to help you. And then that goes down to, on the last bullet point, or the last section here, again, only you know what you want, so you really do need to have a deep understanding of what you like doing or what you don't like doing. And it's okay if you say, see, I still don't know what I want to do, so that's completely okay, but you can say, I don't like sitting behind a desk and doing spreadsheets all day, but I do like going out and talking to people. I like public speaking. Stuff like that, and stuff that you don't like is just as, if almost more important than knowing what you do like. And sitting down, writing that out is going to help you. And when you tell that to all of these people that you're meeting with and emailing with afterward, that is absolutely relevant information. That's one of the first things that I ask somebody. What do you like doing? What do you want to do? And if they can't tell me, I can't help them. And then just really think about things that you have gained skills from. So bartending, waitressing, anything of that sort, and think about what you've liked from those job opportunities. And finally, one of the things that I think you should absolutely write down without question, because it's so important, is interview prep. So write down everything you want, all of the points that you want to make in your interview. This is so important. So something that we do at the Charles Koch Institute and that a lot of other organizations do is behavioral-based interviewing. And this just means that, so past Past examples are really going to typically reflect how past behavior reflects future behavior. So we ask people a lot of very, very in-depth questions about situations. So go through your resume for every single opportunity that you have listed on your resume, for every role. Go through and write down at least 2 things that you want to talk about. So questions that I ask, I really like doing interviewing. I think it's fun. So questions I ask, what are you most proud of? So go through for every opportunity and write down 2 things for that role that you're most proud of. Write down something that, tell me about a time that you failed. And one thing when we're thinking of questions like that, we want, tell us about a time that you failed and also what you learned from this situation. And that is key. And do that for every single role you have on there, because you need to have these questions readily available. And just because you were asked about one question, if I am interviewing and I ask you one question, telling me about a time you failed, I could ask you another question, be like, by the way, well, is there a second time that you failed? So just because you've come up with one example of a time that you failed doesn't mean that
you're off the hook.
Yeah, exactly. And then also think about one of the hardest questions, why do you want this job? So really relate, I think that is such a difficult question. Like, of course, I need a job so I can have money.
Right.
That's an answer, but probably not the best one that you can provide. So really think about those questions, and you can go online, and this is something I suggest everybody does. Go online and type in behavioral-based interviewing questions, and a whole list of questions is going to pop up. I have some here, but there's a whole list online, and you should go through and you should prep at least 2 examples for every role that you have listed on your organization. And again, just to recap everything for everyone, be professional and prompt. Just try to keep it professional and normal, and keep it short and to the point. Just really give your employer what they are asking, and use your connections. And feel free to email those connections to stay relevant in people's mind, to say thank you, and to really just get the word out there about yourself.
Right. So I think we've gotten through all the questions today. Do you have any contact information for our people at home in case they want to stay, ask you questions later on or something of that nature? So up on the screen now, if you would like to stay in touch with Lauren, write down this email. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any job-seeking questions she has, or even use the materials she taught you today. So anyways, again, thank you, Lauren, for stopping in today and talking to us about this great discussion of career skills and writing for your job search.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah. And like Kyle said, if you guys do have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out, and you can also tweet at me on Twitter. Happy to talk to you guys that way. So best of luck, and thank you very much for listening.
Yeah. And again, yes, thank you all for tuning in today. This was a great webinar, and as always, it will be online for your viewing later. You can find this webinar and all of our other past webinars at leadershipinstitute.org/activism-on-demand. Watch this website or this webinar again. Just check out all the slides that will be up on that, and find the questions and ask Lauren later about them. I want to also call your attention to a couple of career training workshops and schools we have coming up here in the building. You can find all of these trainings and more at leadershipinstitute.org/training. But next Thursday, we have a conservative intern workshop from 12 to 5, and then following that, p.m., we will have a happy hour, a networking happy hour here in Arlington, Virginia. With that, our next webinar will be in 2 weeks, and it will again be on career skills, how to negotiate a raise. This will be at 3 p.m. with Steve Sutton, so this is one that I'm sure a lot of people will want to tune into. Thank you again, and have a good night.